you can't really talk about English pattern design without talking about William Morris. His prints, the iconic prints, adorn walls, furniture and windows all over the world. And in today's session, we are going to use those as inspiration as we explore pattern and printmaking. And as always, I'm going to try and make it as easy as possible for you to join along by using some really basic materials. What you will need is some tracing paper. You'll need some polystyrene foam, like a styrofoam sheet from a craft shop, or you can also use an empty and clean takeaway polystyrene box. You'll need some scissors, a permanent marker, an ink pad, and also a sheet of paper. The larger the better, because with pattern design, it's the repeat that really makes the impact. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pop you down. We're going to talk a little bit about William Morris, talk about his time at the Red House, and then we're going to do some pattern designing and some printmaking. So if you'd like to join in, then please do. If you're watching this on repeat, then you can pause at any time. You can rewind it. And also please do feel free to make comments, say hi, ask me any questions. Although I won't be able to answer during the live broadcast, I will look afterwards and I'll answer any questions or comments that you have. And always, as is always, we love to see your creations here on the Virtual Village Hall. So when you've done your printmaking, please don't be shy. We'd love to see the photos that you take, and you can pop those in on the comments too. So without further ado, I'll pop you down and I'll introduce you to William Morris. So here is the man himself, born 1834. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to bamboozle you with lots of different dates and time periods, because if you're anything like me, it goes in one ear and straight out the other. But what I would like you to remember, the 5 years that I would like you to remember, please, are 1850 to 1865. No, 1860 to 1865. Because it was during this time that William Morris and his new wife Jane moved into the Red House, and we've got a picture of it here. The Red House, so called because of the local red brick and tiles that were used to build it, which I always think for a very creative person, it's not a particularly creative name. So this is now owned by the National Trust. It's the only house that was commissioned and by Morris, and also decorated by him. And please let me know if you visited it recently. Pre-lockdown you could, and it's only sort of in the last few months opened up again. And I am planning a trip very soon to go and see it. So if you have visited recently, please do let me know. Let me know if there's anything new that's on at the moment. Now, as you go through the property, what you'll actually notice, what stands out for me, is that he didn't decorate it in his own wallpaper. Although the National Trust have used the wallpaper, obviously, why wouldn't they, to decorate it, and they've given examples of the printing blocks that he used along with the actual wallpaper. He didn't actually use any of his wallpapers to decorate it. Instead, himself, Jane, and their friends set about making furniture like the ones here, painting them, having painting parties, and decorating the walls and the ceilings like this one here. Now, if you look closely at the next picture, and I'm going to enlarge it for you, you'll see that there's lots and lots of tiny little holes. Now, how this was created, they would take a wooden board and nail a pattern using nails into it. And then while the plaster was wet, they would push this into the wall, and that would leave these marks so that anyone that came to their painting parties would know which bits to paint. And in fact, if you go round, there are still parts that haven't been painted yet. So if you look at the patterns, they're actually quite geometric. It's not a style that we associate with Morris today. But out of the 50 plus patterns that he designed during his time, there are only 3 that he designed whilst living at the Red House. And that's this one here, which is called Trellis. This one called Fruit, sometimes known as Pomegranate. And then this one, finally, Daisy. Now, Daisy was inspired by an embroidery that was created by Jane, so his wife, and also her sister. And it's used, if I could just show you there, also his sister. Here is a small piece of the embroidery. And the motif actually comes up all over the Red House, in tiles, painted onto windows, and obviously the tapestry itself. Now this beautifully shows the easiest and most simplest way to make up a pattern. It's a motif that's been repeated again and again, and we're going to use this as the basis of our first exercise. So if you get your pencils ready and your paper, we're going to draw just a really simple, if I can find my pencil, really simple daisy shape based on this. So I'm just going to have this to the side of me. Hopefully you can still see that. I'm going to grab a piece of paper. And then together, we're just going to draw a stylized daisy shape using this as inspiration. I've changed my mind at the last minute with those. I'm going to use these bits to add. They look a bit like feet at the moment, so I might just stylize those up a bit. So they don't look so feet-like. They look more like crowns now, I think. There we go. Okay, just make these lines a little bit thicker. So I'm quite happy with that. Next I'm going to take my tracing paper and then just retrace that shape. You can miss this bit out if you want to. You can draw either directly onto the tracing paper or use the pencil drawing that you've done. But I know that this paper isn't very thick, so I think it might disintegrate a bit as I do the next part of the process. Okay, so I've used elements from all over to create my design. Now I need to get my piece of polystyrene ready. And I'm just going to use this flat part here. So I'm going to cut out using the scissors. I might just mute this because it's a little bit noisy. Okay, so now we want to transfer this image onto our piece of polystyrene. Now remember, any image that goes onto here should really be in reverse. So this is the perfect way of doing that. But just remember, if you're drawing straight onto this polystyrene, then to bear that in mind. It's especially important if you're doing text. So then just using your pencil again, just go all over the back. And you're going to be transferring those lines. They're quite faint, so that's why we've got the permanent marker, because we're going to be going over that in a minute. Oh. So make sure that that pencil side is definitely down and making contact with the polystyrene. So if you've just joined us this afternoon, we are exploring pattern using some of William Morris's designs. We've spent a few moments just talking about the red house where he lived with his wife Jane, and it's also the one that he decorated by making his own furniture, painting the furniture, painting murals. And we're using a tapestry from the house called Daisy, which was made by his wife and sister-in-law, and we're just using that to create our first type of pattern, which is just a simple motif that we're going to be repeating over and over again. So that's all transferred onto the polystyrene. So we just go over with a permanent marker pen. It's going to make it easier for us to see. So we're going to be making a relief stamp here. So the relief just means the parts that stand out. So that's all the relief stamp is. So then I use my pencil again, make sure it's got a really good sharp end to it. And then just before I start, I'm going to think about the parts that I want the colour on when I do my final print, because it's those parts that you need to leave raised or in relief, and that you don't need to push down on. So I'm going to have the actual flower itself in colour. This part I won't have any colour to. I'll have these parts in colour. This part will be like a line drawing, and I'll make a decision I think when I come to the leaves. But let's start here, and I'm just going just the other side of the Sharpie pen, just to make sure we get the full surface area to print. If you start going over that line, then sometimes they do end up looking a little bit sad for themselves. So we want as much maximum amount of print area. And rather than using sort of strokes, I'm just sort of piercing the polystyrene. I find that easier. You get a bit more control that way. And sometimes if you do strokes, then you can sort of drag it and rip it. And then just almost join those dots up together. There's my centre. And then I want to go either side of this stem. It's quite therapeutic actually. Nice way to spend a Tuesday afternoon. So as I said, I want the bud part just to be a line drawing, and then this bit will be the solid colour. The leaves. I think I'm going to go for solid colour as well. That's going to give it some balance. So if you wanted to add any detail, then you can just make marks in the polystyrene, but I'm going to keep it very simple, just like Jane Morris's design. And then I'm just going to take a smaller pair of scissors. These ones that I've got here are a bit large actually. Take a small pair, and then I'm just going to, where I've made these marks, I'm just going to cut around. So I get almost a freestanding stamp. I could leave all this background if I want. That will end up being in a solid colour as well. Or if I wanted to give it quite a lot of texture, I could carry on like that, making marks. But I want this just totally on its own. So I'm just going to be very careful so that it doesn't break. Just take my time. Now I've seen that cut like that, I think I'm going to leave that because I quite like those leaves being a bit wider and having a bit of a detail down the middle. So that's the beauty with this, you can just change your design as you go along. Okay, and take this nice and slow. Okay, so now we are ready to print. So just clear all the bits of polystyrene away. And we're going to make some prints. So open your ink pad if you can. There we go. And I've just got a scrap piece of paper where I'm going to ink up my daisy. So if you've made your daisy smaller than your ink pad, then you can just put that straight on. But if yours is slightly bigger, then just use the ink pad all over. Making sure that you totally cover the polystyrene with ink. I'm just going to do my first print on another bit of scrap paper. So this is where you get nice and messy, turning it over. And then just using, so I've just turned it over with the ink facing down, and then I'm just using my fingers, press down nice and firmly. There, and that's going to make your first print. And I really love using the polystyrene because I think they have a real woodcut quality about it. And as the photos that we looked at earlier on, the prints from the wallpaper are made using wood blocks, so it's a really nice way to connect the two. So we're going to try a few more prints now that we've done our test print, and just for time I'm going to use one that I made earlier, just a smaller one. So if you're watching on replay, or if you want to go back and watch a bit later again, then you can pause this part, so you can have a real experiment with where to place. I'm not sure I will use that one. I think probably I've used that one a bit too much. I'll continue using this one. We've got time. It's just a Tuesday afternoon. I'm going to ink up again. Got my larger piece of paper. It's quite large. And we're going to start just by putting our pattern into a grid formation. So ink up again. This is the most simplest way to build up a pattern, just repeating a single motif in various formations. You can do this very easily with linocut as well. That makes a good stamp to use if you know how to use linocut. So I'll just do 2 more so you just get an idea. And just start to look at the negative spaces between each motif, and they create a pattern on their own. That's what I love about patterns. There's always these little surprises as you build up your pattern. Every single mark counts. I'll just do one more, and then we'll just look at a couple more pattern formations. So that's our grid formation. You can see we're quickly building that up. You could do a similar in the grid, but maybe alternate them so that you have one up, one down, one up, one down. Another way to print is a half print, so almost like, if you think about it, like a polka dot. So I might actually need another bit of paper for this. So because we're just printing by eye, I mean, if you want to, you can measure everything out. But if you're printing by eye, I tend to start in about the middle, and then I work around that. They're getting nice and messy now. And it's always amazing how changing a colour can make the pattern then entirely different again. So experiment with different colours as well. So as you can see, I've put it just above and to the side, so rather like a sort of a polka dot pattern might be. Oops. I think I need a bigger table. And then one below, but in line with this one. So don't forget, if you haven't got time to do this today, the video will be saved on the virtual village hall, so you can come back and look at it later, or you can save it using the button, I think it's above or below, where there's a little save, and also you can share it as well. So share it with your friends, share it with any craft groups that you're involved with, and then you can do it as a workshop for yourself or with friends when you've got a bit more time. I'm just going to add 2 more here. So one here and then one over the other side. It's a nice one to do with children as well. I've gone into schools and done this, and they get lovely and messy and inky and have a lot of fun creating patterns, and they're always amazed how quickly just a large blank piece of paper becomes a pattern. So then just one more on the other side. That's it. So you could even cut something smaller, maybe just a single flower to add to the middles, because there's quite a big space there. But actually from a distance, that's, you know, that's quite good. So they're just two of our basic, the other one underneath. So just two basic pattern formations. What other ones can you come up with? How would you repeat your single daisy motif so that it becomes a pattern? Please let me know in the comments, or even better, have a go yourself. Take a photo and then send it to us. So come back to the red house with me then, with its Gothic architecture. Let's just go back there. With its Gothic architecture, its arts and craft interior. And this is where Morris, Marshall, Faulkner and Co., a little bit of a tongue twister, I always have to be careful I say that, also known as the firm, this is where it came to life. This is where it was born. And it was the firm that produced the wallpapers and the fabric that we see today. And it was born out of the realization that William and Jane, they couldn't find anything that they liked that had been manufactured, so they had to build it themselves. And the red house embodies all of William Morris's ideas, connecting people with their surroundings. It was built in an orchard, an ancient orchard. And I quite like it because he encouraged people not to think of simply pattern as sort of ornamentation, but bringing something from the outside in. So, but rather than, he said, you know, if it was realistic, you might as well just take a branch and pin it to the wall. He was kind of going for something in between the French illusionistic approach that was really popular at the time, and also the geometric approach that we see here. And you can see that culminated in some of these, in some of the pattern designs. Now, there's a beautiful video on YouTube, which I'm going to put in the comments for you, in the notes for you, that shows how a piece of wallpaper is printed, and it's absolutely incredible. So I'll make sure I share that with you. But for our next exercise, we will be building up patterns using connecting tiles. And this is actually one of the first ways that Morris started designing his patterns. And using tiles to create pattern lends itself beautifully to making a pattern go from something very small to very quick to very large very quickly. And there's a real emphasis on how each mark you make counts, a little bit like we were discussing earlier on. Now, I know that sounds a little bit scary, but I've got some really simple tricks to do that. So if you'd like to grab your tracing paper and a pencil, we're going to use some of the designs here as inspiration. Now, I've gone and done you some little simple motifs. I've broken down some of the designs that we're going to be looking at, but let's just run through these very quickly. So these were actually printed, these were designed after the time of the Red House. They're not in a conical order, they're just sort of various designs that I particularly like, and I've picked up on. And you'll see these same motifs repeated again and again. So we have this sort of acanthus leaf, and it's used here again. We've got these single flowers and these almost flame-like images. Again, those leaves and these curly floriferous patterns. And we're going to use those for our next design. So if you've got your tracing paper ready and your pencil, I would like you please to cut a square of tracing paper. So you will need a ruler. Oh, I seem to put mine down. And if you make your tray about 12 centimetres by 12 centimetres, so just using one, it doesn't have to be 100% square, but as square as you can get it. So I would use one of the right angles as your guide. Now I've gone and put my, oh, that's my ruler. That's good. So I'm just going to draw my 12 by 12 square. And then you're going to cut it out. Okay, so I'll just give you a couple of minutes to do that. And then I want you to fold your tracing paper to make it into a triangle. Do a triangle again. And then we're just going to carry on folding it then on the straight. So that we end up with these 8 triangles. Just give you a moment to do that while I just wipe my hands because they're covered in ink. So this pattern design technique was actually shown to me by an artist, Kate Limforth, and she did something called the hive, which was hundreds, I don't know how many, but hundreds of square beeswax tiles, and each one was carved, and she's had workshops where we all went and we designed these tiles, and then they were then went away and carved, and the different tones of the golds and the yellows and the ochres in the beeswax all together with all of these carved shapes was just phenomenal. I think that was back about 2015, so quite a while ago now. But if you do want to have a look, it's Kate Linforth and the Hive. So we're going to start our design now. And we want to use some of these motifs that we were talking about as our inspiration. So I'm just going to hopefully raise this up a bit for you, so you've got those, so you can see those hopefully. Okay, so we're just going to concentrate on 1/4. So I'm just going, just so you can see, I'm going to draw a line on mine, but you don't need to do so on yours. And then we can use elements or complete parts of these motifs to work up our design. So I really like this sort of tulip shape, so I'm going to go in with that one first, and I'm just going to draw this again. You don't need to do this bit, but so just so you can see that I'm concentrating just in this area, and I'm just going to draw half of it. So I'm going to make sure I go over it a few times, and you'll see why in a moment. I'm going to add some detail in the middle, and then I'm going to use some of these shapes here, so these curly leaf shapes. I'm still just concentrating in this small area, and what I think I'm going to do, I'm just going to leave that for the moment. I'm going to trace this part of the pattern over so I get that quadrant, and then I'm going to trace it again and again, so I end up just with this tile, and I'll see what that looks like, and then I can add other bits. So to trace it, you just fold it, so you're making sure that the pencil mark, make sure that it's all on one side, and I'm just going to trace bits that I've drawn. If you need more time and you're watching on replay, please do just pause it, and then you can spend a little bit more time doing this. So that's our first part of the pattern done. So now I want to transfer this to the other quadrant. Yeah, make sure that my pencil marks are all on the same side. It just makes it easier when put a piece of plain paper over that. You have to see it a bit easier than on the black. And you'll start, as you repeat it just within this tile, you'll start to see more patterns take shape, and the empty spaces start getting filled with different shapes. And you might like them, in which case keep them in. You might not like them, in which case take them out, make a change. So I really like this shape that's happening here, and it's got sort of a curve and a point to it. So then carry on folding and tracing. Make sure on the right, yep, the right side. And then the last one, there, and that's our pattern, very quickly built up. What's quite a good idea as well is just to take a plain piece of paper and then, just so that you know how it's all going to look when it comes together, just making sure that your pencil side is down, that's it, so you're transferring the two, so transferring the pencil marks. Trying to keep it still so that I don't move it. And this is really just kind of rough. Just really so you can see what the shapes are going to look like when they're all printed up together. There we are, and I don't know if you can see that, so I'll just quickly go over. See that the two these two curly lines, almost curly kale, they meet in the middle. These points meet as well. And then if you get another piece of paper and then just do it again, then you'll see how all of these bits meet again. And you might just want to add sort of a little bit of more of a design here. So what I would now do, I would take another piece of polystyrene, and in exactly the same way that we did with the daisy motif, transfer that onto the daisy, onto the polystyrene, go over it with a Sharpie pen, and then just using your pencil, think about where you want the colour to be in the final print, and then just exactly the same on the polystyrene, just sort of smooth down all the bits where you don't want the ink to be. And here's one of a very similar design that I did on lino that I will show you. So with this one, I just, if sort of time is against you, and especially if you're doing it in lino, then just do one of the quadrants, and then just always mark on the back where the center is, so that you know always to match that up. So I'm just going to very quickly show you this stamp repeated and made into a pattern. I'll grab another piece of paper. A scrap piece. So I could use proper lino inks as well, but I quite like the stamped effect. So you'll probably want to start right at the edge as well, so you get a nice straight line, but just so you'll be able to see it. I'm going to go from here. And I'll get a roller. Use a roller. So I'm lining up my centre. This does take a bit of concentration, because if you get one of them wrong, then you've put the entire pattern out. So it's just a lovely simple way, using that tracing paper technique, making a tile. Try and remember which way. Oh, here we go. And then just repeat printing. I'll do a few more, because I think the impact really is in all the prints. Impact is in a full page of prints. So we're coming to the end of the session now. So if you do have any questions, please do pop them in the comments. And as I say, because the way my screen's positioned, unfortunately I can't see them at the moment, but I will look through at the end and answer any comments that you have. If you enjoyed today's session, then please let me know. Give me a like, comment, share it with your friends. It's a great technique to be able to share. Oh, I've lost concentration. Yes, that's right. But I just want to do before I leave you, I just want to do a few more, just so you can see how the pattern all starts to come together. Final one. Don't mess it up. I'm going to make sure it's the right way around. Oh no. I think I've lost concentration. There we go. Yes, it's that way. Yes. I hope. It'll be typical, wouldn't it? The last one that you do is wrong. Oh yes, it's all good. It's all good. So there is our William Morris inspired print. And I hope that you've enjoyed this session today. It's been lovely having you on. I hope you've enjoyed our little trip to the Red House, but maybe finding out a little bit more about Morris that you didn't know. I mean, when I put this session together, there was just so much. It was difficult to know really kind of what to leave out and what to put in. But hopefully it's just been, you know, just sort of an hour or so just of relaxation, just a little bit of escapism. And I hope that you've really enjoyed the session today. So I look forward to seeing you next time. Take very good care of yourself. And yeah, I will see you soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.